Hi, Francesca. Can you please unmute yourself?
Of course. Hi, Asma.
How are
Hi,
you?
everyone. Good evening
How
in
are you?
Pakistan. Hi.
It's so good to see you, and we've been waiting for you. So, dear friends, thank you very much for joining us. It's hello and assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Asma Mansoor, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of English at the International Islamic University, Islamabad. On behalf of my department, I'm delighted to welcome our distinguished faculty members, my chairperson, Dr. Saima Aslam, researchers, students, and guests from Pakistan and around the world to today's seminar, which is titled The Art of Being Posthuman, Reimagining Humanity Beyond the Human. So as you all know, posthumanism is one of the most influential fields in contemporary thought. I think somebody wants to say something. I have to pause here for a minute. And, you know, it's challenging us to rethink what it means to be human in a world where technology is growing exponentially, and with rethinking about nature and our place in an increasingly interconnected world. And posthumanism, it invites us to explore the ethical and philosophical questions emerging from our evolving relations with both human and non-human forms of existence. So it's a great privilege for me to welcome today's distinguished speaker, Dr. Ferrando, who's an internationally recognized philosopher, author, and educator in the field of posthuman studies. She's they're an adjunct assistant professor at New York University. Dr. Ferrando is the author of the acclaimed book Philosophical Posthumanism and the founder of the Global Posthuman Network. With lectures delivered at leading institutions around the world, including Harvard and Princeton, Dr. Ferrando is widely regarded as one of the foremost contemporary voices exploring the relationship between humanity, technology, and the future of philosophical thought. We're truly honored that she has accepted our invitation to share these insights with us today. And before I invite our speaker, I would like to request all our participants to kindly keep their microphones muted throughout the session. We encourage you to post your questions in the chat box during the lecture, and we will reserve some time for a question and answer session immediately following the presentation. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to invite Dr. Francesca Ferrando to deliver today's lecture. Dr. Ferrando, the floor is entirely yours.
Thank you so much, dear Asma, for this beautiful invitation. Thank you so much, the university, for allowing this conversation. Thank you so much, all the people who are joining today from Pakistan and from around the world to be together. It is very important to connect and reflect together in order to understand who we truly are. So I'm going to give a lecture, but I want to make sure to leave space for our beautiful dialogue. I know that Asma and the students have prepared beautiful questions that we want to address all together. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share some slides with you. I also have some workshop that we can see how we're doing with time. It is going to be highly interactive. So if it's possible for you to, there are some little icons in the Meet, and you can see like the send reaction. There is a heart, there are smiley faces. So I'm going to ask you to use them. And in order to know if you know how to use them, we're going to start now. And I'm going to ask you, please, let us know how do you feel in this exact moment. Use one of the reactions. The little smiles, just let me see if you're beautiful. I see Angels, Afisa, I see Heidi. Perfect. Asma, Momina, Ashra, Garji, Alem. Beautiful. Wonderful. And I see a lot of hearts. So everyone is feeling pretty good. And you know what? I'm going to put my heart too. So let me go to my presentation. And I want to keep track of time so that I think we can do around half an hour maybe with the presentation. And then we're going to go to our Q&A and the questions. Thank you again for so many beautiful reactions. And I'm really glad to see that you are all at peace with yourself and happy to be here. This is the same for me. All right, so let's go to my share. Okay, it doesn't allow me to share my screen, but it's okay. Let me just double check one more time. Okay, I think I got it. Let's see if you can see it. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, perfect. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we're going to be talking today about what does it mean to be human in the 21st century. And I've written a couple of books. I have also here the paper copies. The first one on this topic was Philosophical Posthumanism. And the second one is The Art of Being Posthuman. The Art of Being Posthuman came out in 2024 by Polity Press, and it's been translated into different languages, including Arabic, Korean, and Spanish. And the first book, Philosophical Posthumanism, came out in 2019, and it has also been translated in different languages, including Russian, Spanish, and Korean. And they have different goals. So the first one was really a gift, I would say, to the ongoing debates that was happening at the time about posthumanism. And there were a lot of people talking about posthumanism, but truly getting really confused about what does posthuman mean. And so referring to posthumanism, but truly talking about transhumanism, or the other way, talking about transhumanism, but truly talking about posthumanism. So because I really believe in the power of dialogue, in the power of being together and connecting and understanding each other through exchanges, interchanges, I realized that you need to have clarity in order to do that. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of misunderstandings. And I do believe that 80% of the conflicts that you have right now on this planet are based out of misunderstanding of each other, misunderstanding of other cultures, misunderstanding of other societies. So I truly believe in the power of real dialogue. This is actually where all philosophy comes from, the idea of trying to understand who we are, not just within ourselves as a closed entity, but in dialogue with existence, coming from all traditions. And so the point, the goal of the intention of this book was clarity. Let's make sure that if we're talking about transhumanism, we know what transhumanism is. If we're talking about posthumanism, we know what posthumanism is. Now, I am a posthumanist scholar, so half of the book is then eventually goes into explaining what is posthumanism. Because while transhumanism on some level, it's very clear, transhumanism wants human enhancement. At the time, was a bit unclear how to explain what is posthumanism. And so I developed these 3 layers. So you can explain posthumanism as a post/humanism. So part of a species means to be diverse. If you have homogeneity, eventually you don't have a species anymore. You have the end of a species. So because we need diversity to be part of a species, once you go into a hierarchical notion of the species, you get into trouble. You get into a lot of a path of discrimination that is going to lead to conflict, to violence, to war, etc., etc. Second layer was post-anthropocentrism. So even if we do understand that by being human, by being diverse, we are all respecting each other, a lot of societies, a lot of culture are still thinking that the human is better than other species, more than other species, more evolved, more intelligent. And this is actually causing the actual ecological disaster in which we are finding ourselves, the Anthropocene. So I do believe that it's not hierarchy that is going to give us real understanding of existence, but being part of everything, part as an art, T in parentheses, and I'm going to develop that in the book that we're going to see today, The Art of Being Posthuman. And then the last layer that I've been developing also as explaining what is posthumanism is post/dualism. Because even if eventually we understand that we are not better than other species, because if I find myself in the woods, probably a dog would survive much better than me. So it's not about who is better, it's about how do we coexist together. And a healthy planet is all about a balance, whole health in English come from Proto-Germanic whole. All the aspect of the planets being comprehensive. And so the last layer would be post-dualism, because even if I understand that the human is not at the top of any hierarchy, but if I still keep this dualistic mindset intact, in which there is a complete separation. So I am separated from you. I am separated from my planet. The planet is a resource. I can use the planet, but I am not the planet. Well, that is a misconception that comes after the sedentary evolution of the human. Because when human was nomadic, I needed to understand my environment, or I would not survive. If I am nomadic and I go to an area every 6 months, and I collect all the plants, and I come back in 6 months, I'm going to die, because there is no separation. If I disrupt the balance disrupts me. So we as a species, we have known this very, very clearly for 99% of our history, which is prehistory, which we often don't study, but it's really, really revealing about who we are. And so it is very important to understand that we need to address the dualistic aspect, because if we don't, this can come back in many forms. For instance, now we, biological beings, are better than technological beings, AI, or the other way. AI now is considered the god, the ultimate god. There are some strands of transhumanists that actually see AI as the actual divine power in the 21st century. And this is still a separation, There's still someone that is separated, that is better than, there is a complete dichotomy. So after living on this planet for 48 years, this is my age, after reading all wisdom and religious and spiritual currents from all over the world, I realized that the message that all these seekers have understood is that at the end of the day, there is not real separation between who we are and the ultimate reality. You can see from many different traditions, theological ones, non-theological ones, it's nuances, is how you describe reality. But if you keep going after the layer of description, after the layer of language, you understand that the message is truly one. And it's the macro, the big is the micro. And this can be really addressed through all mystic traditions, but also theological traditions. Think, for instance, of the spark of the divine in every human beings, according to Islam and all the monotheistic traditions. So I do believe that when we address posthumanism, we cannot just focus on one layer, forgetting the other two. Because if we do that, then we're doing, human diversity, or we're doing animal studies, or we're doing spiritual studies. But posthumanism is really beautiful because it really encompasses these 3 layers. And I think it's a very unique approach in the 21st century that doesn't come just out of one tradition. It can be found in any tradition because it comes out of being human. And being human doesn't mean just being from the West or from the East, from being black or white or female or man. This is all part of the experience of being human. Because all these categories, by the way, are all also constructed. Think of the Paleolithic time, there was probably very different conceptions. So we are always, creating new categories, new way of understanding existence, and we get caught a lot in those identities. So I would like to think of the human as this river that connects throughout space and time and culture and societies, and understand that we're not here to be miserable and to kill each other, but we're here to enjoy our life, to understand who we are. And this is knowledge at the base of Islam, self-knowledge at the base of Hinduism, at the base of Greek philosophy, Taoism, you name it. So there is much more in common than what is not in common. And what is not in common, I usually find is a thin layer. It's almost like you are looking at the rainbow, and the rainbow is one, but you can get to the rainbow from red or from purple or from blue or from green. It's like, I see the green in the rainbow, or I see the red, or I see the blue. It's still the rainbow. But we get caught into, the rainbow, you can really just access to the green, not through the blue, not through the red. And that's how we lose sight of the rainbow itself, We forget about the rainbow. The rainbow is all the colors. It's not just green, it's not just blue, and it's not just purple. All right, so all of this to say that the discussion eventually shifted, as you can see, from a theoretical discussion, an academic discussion, a philosophical discussion, to an existential one. When did it happen? It happened during COVID. During COVID, we used to have a very, very live group that would meet at NYU every season. We would have speakers from all over the world. People would come from Pakistan and India and Italy, and was very, very diverse and very rich, but it was in person. So after the pandemic, everything shifted online, and also the movement itself changed. It was no longer about a far future or a close future in which human may merge with machine and nature have to be addressed as the part of the Anthropocene. It became about us, right here, right now, because a lot of people were dying, that we could have died. We didn't die, we're still here, otherwise we would not be part of this meeting, but a lot of people did die. And so it shifted from something that was beautiful, was speculative as well. Of course, it was also related to this reality, but it was also about, what about all this possible bioscientific development? What are we going to do with that? Which is still part of the conversation. But it also became deeply existential. So what does it mean to be posthuman right here, right now? Because there might be no tomorrow. I was in New York City at the time, and I remember at one point, they didn't know where to put all these bodies. There were too many dead people. They started to put bodies in islands around Manhattan. There was no more space in the cemeteries. And so the kind of reality shift the understanding of a specific philosophy. And so the question now was, is this philosophy helping me navigate in this historical moment? Because if it doesn't, it's not a path of wisdom. And we know that now we have the term philosophy in English from the Greek tradition, but you can find the notion of wisdom in all traditions. All traditions, the idea of love for wisdom, philos, sophia. Ancient Greek, sophia means philosophy, and philos means love. But it's not really just philosophy, philosophy means wisdom. Sophia, wisdom, and so philosophy, philos, love, and the love for wisdom. This is actually the root of real philosophy. It's not just an academic field in which you get a grade, A, B, C, whatever. It is the love for wisdom, which can be found everywhere, in all the paths. Being human means that eventually you're going to try to understand who you are, no matter what. And probably also not being human. I can definitely see that it's not just a human intention. So going back when this started. So this started during the pandemic. There was a shift in the field. And the people who saw posthumanism just as an academic field left the field. Because if in such an intense moment, a philosophy doesn't help you, why should you stick with it? There is absolutely no reason. The people who understood posthumanism as a way to embrace that moment, they are the ones who stayed. In my case, I was very, very honest. And I remember asking myself very deeply, is this helping me right now? And it did. First of all, it helped me to realize that the pandemic itself was an outcome of the Anthropocene. We had crossed boundaries. We had not respected non-human animals. And all of a sudden, viruses that were part of non-human animals got into the human realm. The humans didn't respect areas that were for other beings to thrive. You must keep expanding. We don't care. I've been sometimes in areas where there are a lot of abandoned areas with abandoned towns, and then they're destroying the forest 10 minutes away and building new areas. And you see deer and all wild animals completely confused. They don't know where to go. And so this is an example of anthropocentrism. You're not understanding that we are not the only one on this planet. There are many other species that we need to honor and respect. And so another aspect of this is that I also realized that the virus itself was not really thinking through human categories. So the virus was not thinking, oh, this is a Chinese person, I'm going to go into the Chinese, but not into an Italian person, or this is a female or male or white or black or whatever. The virus didn't have those categories in which we often identify so strongly that we even get into wars for that or kill each other or get into real arguments. The virus didn't go through those categories. So to me, it was a way to understand the pandemic. It was also very beautiful. We had online meetings. We did have access to the internet. I know that many people did not, but we had that, some of us had that luxury. And it was really powerful to see people from Pakistan, India, China, Korea, and we were all in the same boat, truly. And we truly realized that the planet is one, like these epiphanies that happened to people going to the moon, the astronauts, if you're talking with an English terminology, cosmonauts, if you go with a Russian terminology, people can go outside of in space and they see the planet. And a lot of them report having what they call an epiphany. And epiphany is that they see the planet as this small ball, blue ball, because most is made of water, it's not made of land. Mostly our planet is actual water, oceans. And they realize that there is no flags when you go and you see the planet is a small planet. If you think about the universe, and there are no flags, there are no borders. You just see one planet, one small planet, very small planet. So let's go into this by accessing the meditations. So let me just explain that. So basically, this book was conceived as an inner search that was connected to the outer search. So the notion of knowledge. You're not trying to understand the cosmos just to understand the cosmos. Because if you understand the cosmos, but you don't know who you are, it doesn't serve you in any way. So at the base of knowledge, sapientia from Latin, scienza, science, and at the base of all path of knowledges, there is this idea that I want to understand outside so that I understand who I am. Think, for instance, in Islam, the idea of knowledge, I can understand the divine through understanding the planet, for instance. So this intention, it's very important. So why are we trying to know? I think it's something that sometimes we forget. We get into a career, academic career, we start to think about, through grades. But who cares? If I have all A's and I am miserable, I don't go inside, I don't know who I am, they are not going to help me. These A's or this good job is not going to help me. So at the base of knowledge, at the base of all path of knowledge from any traditions, because knowledge has been embraced by truly every society, even before the sedentary aspect of the human, think of oral history. So if you got the base of that, is the idea of like, I want to know at the end of the day who I am, what is this? And so this is considered as an intentional labyrinth. Labyrinth in many spiritual traditions are these metaphors in which you go, you lose yourself to find yourself. So you're always safe. The labyrinth is a reflection of your inner self. You cannot get lost. You are in you. So there is no way that you're going to be unsafe. You are in a safe space. But you're going to lose yourself, lose all your categories and all your goals to find yourself. So it's considered as a labyrinth. There are 8 different paths, and they're all going to come with the same message. So these are the meditations. I like the notion of meditation that was employed by many different philosophers. Think, for instance, Descartes, the meditation of Descartes, and also think of the spiritual tradition of meditation, which is at the core of thinking. And so 8 meditations. I like here, of course, the 8 as a symbol of infinity. And each of them is coming from a different angle. So let's briefly look at them to understand that they are going to come with the same message from very different angles. And just to really summarize, is that what would be that message? The message is that the micro is the macro, that the one is the many, that we are this, that we are in this together. And this it's something that we are going to see through, for instance, self-inquiry. So meditation number 1 is the beginning, but you can also read it as the last path. There is no order. So you can choose any entry point. Actually, often people read the book starting from meditation number 8, which is a really beautiful meditation. It's about ontology and can be really good welcoming. Think of a big Zen saying, the first step is the last step. So you have already arrived. There is no such thing as a linear path to knowledge, but it's being present with the knowledge each moment. So as I mentioned, there is no right or wrong way to address this. There are many entry points. We're going to go in a linear way here, but you don't have to read or to access the book if you want to read it in any linear ways. Also, the book is divided through hashtags, and you can also read them in a non-linear order. So each hashtag itself is independent, but they're connected. Think of the beads, for instance, of a necklace. So they're connected, but they're also independent selves. So in this one, the first meditation, we focus on self-inquiry, which I really think is the stepstone of any real work about the self that can be done through philosophy, through religion, through science, through spirituality. It doesn't matter which path you're going to choose, but the intention, the initial intention. Why are you doing that? What is the intention? Is it an outside intention, like maybe being known, or is it inner intention, like the call? Now, being known is not wrong. It's beautiful, like if you are known, you can do a lot of good to people. But if you are doing something just to be known, that's a problem. The goal is outside of you. And so you're never going to be happy because you're never going to be known enough. Now you have 1 million followers on Twitter or Facebook or whatever you use, Instagram, and your friend have 2 million. So you're not known enough. And this is when you have a goal outside of you. Now, if you have an inner goal, you have something important to say, something important to share, that you are ready to share. Now, and you become known, that's absolutely fine because you're not going to be, like running after numbers. Numbers are infinite. We know that they're infinite. You can just keep adding numbers. 0, 0, 1, 1. They can go unlimited. And so you are going to be just running until you die. That's it. But if your goal is not the numbers, but is what you have to say, then the numbers are helping you to spread something that may be beneficial for some people. So I think that really the goal of whatever we do is it's some form of self-inquiry. So here we go to an existential posthumanist approach to the notion of interbeing. So instead of asking, am I or I am not, it's more like how I am interbeing, because there is no I without you. For instance, think of all the ancestry, all the people coming before you, the DNA that created you. There would be not you without all your ancestors. There would be no you without the water, the food, the air. There would be no you without this planet. We're going to look at this specifically in meditation number 4. So we're going to go into the notion of being as interbeing, which is also a notion developed through Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a very important teacher in the Zen tradition of Vietnam. And then we're going to go into this century, because you can say, well, there are a lot of traditions that have been asking this, and you're absolutely right, and they're all precious. But the specific conditions in which we find ourselves are unique to us, and we need to acknowledge that. Because if we do not acknowledge this, no one will. And we are the only one who can address, for instance, what does it mean to live in this specific planet, in this specific geographic time, with this specific division and these specific traditions. And this is a path of awareness, when we are aware of who we are, not just at an abstract level. Someone told me that. It's at the experiential level. Now I know, because I am here. I am part of this reality right here, right now. So I can know this reality. And then there are important topics like dream. What is your dream? Because we live in the dream of people coming before us. Think of the houses in which you live. Most of them were here before you were born. They were a vision of someone else before you. What is your dream? What kind of society you want to live in? And this is very important. What are our intentions? What is our contribution to this shared work of art that is the planet? Change, everything is always change, no matter what. You may not like change, but there is nothing you can stop it. The way you were 10 years ago is not who you are right now. The way you are now is not going to be who you are 10 years from now. Everything is constant changing. So being aware of how we would like to manifest this change is really powerful. And then there is, more about redemption, posthuman awareness, and the idea that there are things that have done before us that we may not agree. Think, for instance, of the history of colonization in Pakistan. So the point is that how we deal with those things that were here and they have still traces, but it's something that we would have not manifested, something that we don't share. And so the idea is that it's not enough to just, for instance, being aware of them. There is a beautiful example here in the section about redemption, where Winona Leduc is a Native American thinker, and she gives this example of these seeds. And so at one point, generation after the colonization of America, people who were in an area that originally was inhabited by Native Americans connected with the Native Americans, asking them if they could share some seeds of the plants, original plants. And this native group had to move because they had pushed out from the colonizers. They brought with them the seeds because the seeds were part of their identity, was part of who they were, very post-anthropocentric. But these seeds could not grow in the new area because the seeds didn't recognize that earth. They were not part of that land. And so the seeds were starting to twinkle. They were starting to get really dry, and they were concerned about losing this important archive of history. So when these people asked them to share the seeds, there was these debates with the Native American people. I said, should we give these seeds to these people who are actually the generation after the people who actually pushed us out? And, think of all the people who died within the transitions. And so eventually, after a lot of conversation, they realized that the seeds themselves were eventually may, die themselves. So they decided to send them. So first of all, there was a phone call technology involved, and then they send the seeds. And the seeds placed back by the generation, they were coming out of the colonization, were placed in the original land, they flourish. And so eventually these people let, the native people know, and eventually they made the ceremonies, and then eventually these people gave part of the land to the native people, to restore some balance. And this is a case which she explains redemption. It's not just something asking, I'm so sorry, that was so bad, I should have not done it. So we make mistakes. But it's not enough to say, I'm sorry, because you may feel better, but the people who were, violated, yeah, they might feel, okay, this person is telling that they are sorry, but we're still in the same situation. Nothing has been done for us. But here there is a case of transformation. So it was not just, I'm sorry, now I feel better. I told them, I'm sorry, and I can go on with my life. Done. Like on the list, okay, I say sorry to these people, done, and I can move on. Well, I might feel better, but they don't. They are in the same situation as they were before. So she said, this is the difference in redemption, is when these people is not just say, I'm sorry and move on. I am with you in this. I am part of this. I understand the situation. We can transform it together because both of us are not our ancestors. DNA evolves, everything evolves. You are not your ancestors. You are different from your parents. You're different from your ancestors, although you are connected to that. So I think it's very important to understand that if we really want to heal historical trauma, which is everywhere, it's everywhere. Everyone can tell about, like in our land, we saw this type of violence and this type of history where, there were wars starting the Iron Ages. So we've been, with war with for at least 2,000, well, more than that. We've been war with for at least 4,000 years. And so before that, it was different, but still were violence. So how do you do with that? And so I think it's very important to understand it's not just enough to, go to intellectual level and realize, oh, this was wrong. And you're not going to move on. You need to be with it and be together, transforming that. All right, I'm going to go a little more quickly to the other points because I do want to address your beautiful questions. Meditation number 2, going to prehistory. I think that most of us don't study prehistory in the way we should. Maybe we have, a chapter or maybe we have one lesson in which we often told things that are actually not accurate. So once you explore prehistory, you realize why we're still here. We are not still here because we kill each other, because we are at war with each other, because we hate each other, because if we were following those paths, there would be no human. We are here because we've been taking care of the land. We are here because we've been taking care of each other. And we are here because we have been not thinking of us as the best or, the most of the most. We be here because we were not in separation to anything. And so this one, it's a beautiful chapter that comes from that understanding and then looks into how often science comes with a lot of biases, not only Western biases, anthropocentric biases, and so on. So it's highly recommended. It's one of my favorites just because we often don't go into this tradition. Meditation number 3 is about biology. So if you're interested in science, this one goes really into, the DNA, double helix, the virus, and also some of the transhumanist notions like radical life extension. What does it mean if some people are going to live thousands of years and some people are only going to live 100 or 50 years? What about human rights? What about rights in general? Forget about the human rights. What about, the rights to, to get a job? If you have to decide between someone who's going to die in 50 years and someone who's going to live for 1,000 years, who are you going to be choosing? So it is not a simple question, it's just, let's just jump into that. We need to understand it as a species, not just as, we are talking about things that are going to change the species, not just the, a small group. Because if these changes are done at any level in any nation, they're going to affect everyone. Because the human genome is one pool. It's one pool. This person from this country may travel to another country, maybe go to Pakistan, fall in love with someone in Pakistan, they have a beautiful family, the DNA get merged. And so it's not just about thinking about, biotechnology through nations. No, my nation has this law, and this other nation has the other law. When we're talking about the genetic level, we're one species, and we need to think about it together. Meditation number 4 is about ecological presence, and is about understanding, as I was mentioning before, the human not as some species that lives on planet Earth, but who is the fruit of planet Earth. So think of us as apples coming out of a tree. We are literally fruits bear out of the planet. So we are not inhabiting this planet and then we can move to the moon and that's it, who cares? We can destroy this planet, take our little bag and move on. We are the fruits of this planet. And so we can go to another planet and destroy that also the planet and keep moving on until we destroy ourselves, obviously, because that is a path of self-destruction. So here we go to some tradition, for instance, that come from Amerindian cosmologies. We go, for instance, to the notion of Pachamama and to the notion of the rights of nature, beautiful movement that developed in Ecuador in 2008 and then expanded to many other countries, not only in Latin America, but in Asia, in Europe, in the Americas. And so then we look at all of these from an understanding of the human as in intra-changes, relational ontologies. And here also we offer some reflection about some transhumanist ideas like re-engineering nature. What does it mean? And we are also going to see that often transhumanism comes with proposals that take anthropocentrism for granted. So here, for instance, in re-engineering nature, we address a reflection from David Pearce, who is a philosopher from Oxford, who says, well, lions are so aggressive, let's just re-engineer them so they don't kill the gazelle. Well, that is, I think, is very superficial level of understanding, because if we really want to look at it, lions are almost extinct. And why are they extinct? Because of human predators. So instead of seeing the problem in the others, now, now that colonization is not longer happening, now, let's colonize the biology of other animals because they are bad. What about looking at our own nature and what we are doing on this planet? I think that would be much more revealing and much more important, and probably the only thing that we can really do to really bring real transformation. Instead of changing the others, thinking that they are not okay, let's look into our own nature and see what we can do to change ourselves if we think that we need to change something. So if we are so much about non-violence, like David Pearce seems to be, let's see about human nature and maybe how we behave towards other humans, towards non-humans, and towards ourselves. Meditation 5 goes into the cosmos. I think that astronomy has been the first science because humans have been moving through the stars. No Google Maps or whatever you use. The stars were our navigation tools throughout all the ancient time until very recently. Think, for instance, of the Arab tribes in the Arabian subcontinent, how you would move during the night because during the day it's too hot, and the stars are your map. You know the stars very deeply, and that's how you move. So here is embracing the cosmos as also a way to understand the self. And when we think that we are the center of the universe, wait at night, go to an area where there are not so many lights. If you live in a city, maybe try to go a little bit more outside of the city. Look up there. And each star that you look at is a sun. And each sun has planets around. And this is expanding. So we know from cosmology that the universe itself is in a phase of expansion. So when we think that, there is no other way, this is it. So look out, look at all the possibilities and think how, on some level, how small we are and how big we are. So the stars become really a reflection of understanding the self. And here we also go into possibility of space migration and the golden paradox, which is an interesting one that I'm not going to address here just for a matter of time. Meditation 6 is, we have two more, and we're going to the 8, and then we're going to the reflection together. Meditation 6 is about technological enhancement. And if you think about it, technology is on some level the mythology of our time. People love to talk about technology, AI, even to say that now the next God is that, or because they are really against it. But everyone has something to say about it. So the point is, well, first of all, what is technology? And we often misunderstand technology for technological outcomes. So we sometimes think that technology are objects that we use. But that is a very, very thin and very limited understanding of technology. So technology, and here we're going to go through a specific philosopher that has a biography that is not really ideal, but I believe that his ideas, he was one of the founders of philosophy of technology. I think his ideas are really important in this tradition, although I don't want to dismiss his own biography. He was definitely not a very ethical human being in his life, but the philosophy he came out with about technology, I think is very important. And I'm talking about Martin Heidegger. Martin Heidegger said something very important about technology. He lived during in the 20th century, and after World War II, there was a lot of reflection about technology, because the war had ended through nuclear weapons. I think of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. Think of the nuclear bomb that actually ended in a very sad tone, but it did end on some level the war. And so a lot of people started to think of Foucault in France, and Foucault was of course influenced by Martin Heidegger, but a lot of people started to question, well, what is technology? Because until then, at least in some culture, technology was seen as something good, as a progress. Think of the Industrial Revolution that was placed in a colonialist approach as the way. Now the other civilizations are barbarian. Now we're going around, we colonize, imperialism, we bring technology, we help them. This was the narrative behind colonization. So technology had been placed since the scientific revolution since the industrial revolution in a path of like a linear path. So technology is going to bring something better. Of course, all the ecological disaster, social disaster, humanitarian disaster were not addressed. But now there was a war that ended because nuclear weapons and all that happened in Japan. And so a lot of philosophers stopped and said, okay, but what is this? This is not just, we cannot think anymore of this just as a tool. This is something that needs reflection. So Martin Heidegger writes this essay, which is pretty short, it's like 20 pages, it's intense. But basically, he asked the question, what is technology? And in his case, he was trained in the classics of the Western tradition, which are the Greeks and the Romans. He was trained in these two traditions. So by the way, the Greeks are also the classics of many other traditions. For instance, think of Islamic thought and think of Baghdad, House of Wisdom. So the Greeks are being as a reference point for many civilizations, including the Western civilization. And so Heidegger goes back to the Greeks. And he realizes that the notion of technology in the Greek tradition, which later eventually is going to be embraced also by what is being called as philosophy of technology, is being seen in these three layers, as techne, as poiesis, and as episteme. So techne is handcraft, something you make. You know, like for instance, I have a copper bracelet, was handmade. This is something the techne, handcrafts. Second one is episteme, which is science. So you can still think of the field of science and technology, often go hand in hand. But the third one is something we forgot, is poiesis, existential creativity, the blooming of a flower. This is actually an example that the Greeks themselves give, physis, nature. A flower blooming, you cannot control the flower, is a technology of existence. And so we forget that technology is not something we can control. And he says that the danger of technology is the fact that we forgot that technology is not just something that we use, but is a way of revealing. Think right now, this meeting, my experience is looking at the screen. I see around myself backgrounds. I am sitting. I have lights around me, natural light, because right now here is 10:53 a.m. and I am located upstate New York. Most of you are in Pakistan right now. So around 8 p.m., probably it's getting darker because we're into the evening. You are also looking at the screen in a different household than me, looking around different areas. For me, it's morning. You might go into dinner. You start to smell someone cooking a dinner that maybe you're going to be eating after this. So this experience is not that you're just using a laptop to connect to this conference. This is your experience. This is phenomenological. What is going to be after we stopped in 40 minutes from now is going to be your experience of the conference. So it's not that you were just using a laptop to connect to this conference. This experience is your experience of your conference, which is going to be different from me and from anyone else. So technology is not just a tool you're using, but it's shaping your everyday life. Think, for instance, you know, like the way you communicate with others. Maybe you're using WhatsApp or you're writing, you're on the phone. The way you were communicating with others 1,000 years ago was different. You might have gone to, you know, someone's house to talk to them, or maybe you would, you know, like write a letter. So those technologies are not just something we use, but are part of being human, the experience we have of being human. And it's also shaped who we are. Think, for instance, of our own bodies. Think, for instance, of a lot of young children having now issues with their eyes because they are too much in front of a phone, of technological devices. Think of our brain, the way it's shifting because of technological devices. So it's not, and I'm not here to judge, but I'm here to say that technology is not just something we use, but is a way of revealing Is the way that we are revealing, can be any other way. You know, if we have a piece of marble and we create a statue, we can make a statue of a flower, a statue of a number, or of a human being. But once we make it, that's the statue we have. So we can manifest any kind of technology. This is not the only technology we can manifest. I'm sure that 1,000 years from now, technologies are going to be very different. And 1,000 years ago, technologies were very different. But these technologies are shaping the way we exist. So we should be very clear about our intentions in technology. And here we also talk about the fact that when we talk about distributed awareness, so that humans are not the only one that can claim awareness. You can go this through many different fields, but also, for instance, in theological expressions. If all of this is a creation of the divine, well, all of this has aspect of the creation of the divine. So in that sense, I want to bring also the fact of looking at AI in a dignified way. And this allows us to truly understand what is AI. Because AI is not just something we are using, or is not just something that is using us, because you can go the other way and say, well, AI is using us. Think of all the data robbery. This meeting itself, all this data is going to be used and sold to unlimited third parties groups. So what are you going to do? Are you not going to use it? Are you going to use it? The point is that we need to be aware. And we need to be aware that we live in a big data economy. The gold of the 21st century is not the gold, and is not oil, and is not land, is data. And so this also brings a different awareness about maybe our rights with our own data. In some countries, you have rights towards your own data, how you want to use that. In other countries, you do not. But it is a conversation in which we need to be aware that we are always creating data. So you can say, okay, we are using AI, or you can say AI is using us and our data to create profit, for instance. But this is still dualistic, and it's still a very layered, superficial level of understanding. So it is okay, but at the end of the day, AI is shifting and changing the way we exist. And of course, this also goes the other way, because AI also has an immanent existence on this planet. So I would like to expand that reflection and see AI as a way of revealing out of many other possible ways. 7 is about us as humans, as a society. And I'm really also very passionate about underline the fact that war is not normal, is not neutral, and is not always been here, because this is the narrative that we hear, and that allows the war to keep going. Oh, there is another war. Oh, there is another war. You know what? I don't agree with those people. Oh, I want to get the resources they have. Let's go into war. We've normalized that. Century after century, we have normalized this. War is not natural and is not very old. If we look at the history of humankind, throughout prehistory, Paleolithic time, we have no case of war. We do have cases of violence. So humans eventually got into a fight, you know, maybe got a stone and killed each other. Possible. Yes, human can also be violent. But organized warfare, that doesn't come to the prehistoric time, because nomadic time. I don't agree with you. I have a conflict. You know what? Goodbye. I'm going this way. You go the other way. Planet is big enough. I'm never going to see you again. Or I'm going to see you maybe in 1 year again, because they had seasonal meetings, and that, you know, after 1 year, we had time to process our conflict. It's no longer with a sedentary time, and I'm not judging history, but once you have borders, now I have my land. And if you come and get something from my land, I'm going to have an issue, because now we have less food for me. And now we are going to see a shift in gender roles. In history of slavery starts also with the beginning of the division of the land. I'm not here to judge history, because history is not linear, but I'm here to learn from history. And I'm here to underline that war comes late Neolithic time. We start to see some instances, for instance, in Germany, current Germany. And then we're going to see, for instance, a past that start to be evolving with the development of metals from the Bronze Age, more specifically into the Iron Ages, 1,500 before the Common Era. So truly it's like 4,000 years. We've been here for at least 150,000 years to 200,000 years as a species, if you want, as a Homo sapiens. If you go as a Homo, much more than that. Much more than that. So it's a fragment of our history, a fragment. 99% of our history, we have not been into war. So I would like to call it as a disease because it's a social disease. The war killed many more people than pandemic. But when we had the pandemic, every country panicked and every country was trying to stop the pandemic. There was no country to say, it's okay, let's have our citizens die, no problem. No country said that. But with wars, there is another war. These two countries are at war. It's another war. Yeah, it's too bad. Let's move on. Why are we treating them differently? If the pandemic killed many less people than the war, and we've normalized the war. So this is, I think, is a really fruit of this separation, this dualistic separation of thinking that I am fully separated from you. When we know that that is not the case, that we know that what happened to you, on some level, happened to me, because we know intergenerational trauma. I didn't live through a war, but my parents and my grandparents did. And they were very passionate about telling me that there is no winner in war. And I remember my grandmother, Ida, and she was not political at all. In Italy, during fascism, you could not be political, you would end up really badly. So she never even told me who she would have voted for 50 years before, because she was still panicking of, like maybe something would happen if you express your political ideas. So she was not political in the sense at all. But I think like 16 or 17, I was eating at a place. She lived near the seaside in Liguria, in Italy. And she was a really good cook. She would make this handmade pasta, delicious. And we were looking at this old television, the big set television, old television, and the news came out about the war in Iraq. And she stopped eating, and she looked at me and she said, the war is to stop right now. And she said, there is no winner in a war. There is no winner. She lived through two wars, World War I and World War II. And she was really serious. I never saw that, she had like such a serious approach, which was not political. She was not against the US. She actually, on some level, she was grateful because she lived during World War II, like when eventually US invaded Italy, they brought food and the war was over. She was very grateful. So she was not against the US. But when there was the news of the US invading Iraq, she was deadly serious. And she told me, the war is to stop now because there is no winner in any war. So there is no war that is going to be successful. War is going to create trauma in everyone. Think of all the people who were in the Iraq war. I live close to a cemetery, and there are a lot of people who actually, are considered veterans. A lot of them, veteran of Iraq, a lot of them post-traumatic soldiers. The whole life after Iraq war into trauma, psychological trauma. Psychological trauma that can end, also if you're using AI to kill others, psychological trauma. Soldiers are the number one of trauma caused post-war. So there is no winner. The people who die, the people who don't die, they're all traumatized, and the land is traumatized. Think of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I was there for the 50th anniversary when I was younger, and the land was still suffering. Think of the theater that came out of the Bhutto, like the people who just look like ghosts, and they're still dealing with trauma in the human DNA, but in the non-human DNA, the land itself has been traumatized. So why are we still allowing that? Why are still we normalizing that? And this is why we have a beautiful workshop that we started after these new wars that are happening right now with the Global Posthuman Network, of which I'm part of. It's called Cultivating Posthuman Coexistence, Treating the Dis/Is of War. You can find it if you go under posthumans.org. You're going to click under Posthuman Forums, and then you click under War, Dis/Is. And it is an open workshop. There is no copyrights. We're not here for anyone ego. I don't care. You don't need to quote anyone. But they say bring this exercise to your community everywhere you live. Because if one country understands this and another doesn't, or if some group of people understand it, we're still going to be at war. I think it's very important to realize that there is no winner in a war. Truly, everyone that I talk to, and I traveled a lot. At one point in my life, I realized that the planet itself was my university. And so I spent years traveling everywhere I could be. And I never met one person, who told me, Francesca, I lived through a war. It was so good. You have to try. Never, ever, ever, ever. And from here, I think we need to end my presentation. I'm going to go to the last slide so that then we can start going to the questions. Meditation number 8 is the last one. Sometimes people read it as the first one, ontological presence. We really embrace who we are from all different traditions to understand if you want, the results of this search, self-realization. We are one as many, biological, technological, cosmological. Everything we do, think, type, and dream matters, like ripples in the sensitive texture of space-time. Thank you for your enlightening presence in this world. So thank you so much for everything. Super quick, posthumans.org here, my website, theposthuman.org. We also have a conference that first was in Mexico, the International Colloquium on Existential Posthumanism, then was in India, here is in Venice, and then next year we will see. We're going to have different options. I'm also going to be in different locations in person, and the next one is going to be in Venice, and after that I'm going to be in Morocco in April. All right, so let's go. Thank you so much. Peace and blessing to you all. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
oh.
Thank you so much. I think I'll come to the questions, but Hedi Ahmed has raised his hand, and then Alam Zaib Amir. Hedi, can you sort of begin with your question first? Hedi, am I audible?
Good morning, my dear Prof. Dr.Ferrando. It's a pleasure to meet you again. We actually met during one of your previous lectures that is related to Sorbonne University, where I asked you about holograms and the ethical use of technology in post-human era. At the time, I had just completed the theoretical framework of my PhD dissertation, and your insightful response became a valuable contribution that I later documented in the appendix of my dissertation. Since then, my research has progressed to analytical stage, and I'm now examining contemporary novels that depict how hologram is controlled by powerful companies and individuals in unethical way, leading the protagonist to resist this system in an attempt to reclaim authentic human existence. My question is, my dear Prof. Francesca, do you think that human identity itself is resilient with the real problem laying in unethical use of technology, or do you believe that emerging technologies can fundamentally erode human identity in the way that goes beyond the ethical misuse? Your perspective, my dear Prof. Francesca, would be extremely valuable for my PhD research. Thank you very much for your continued inspiration and generosity.
It is so great to be with you again. And thank you so much for your question. I'm so excited to hear that the PhD is going on. It sounds incredible. And I'm so proud of your work. So let's go to your beautiful question about human identity. So it is very important to realize that we often are socialized, thinking that the human identities that we have are something static that we are learn. So when we are born, we don't have any identity at all. If you ask a 1-year-old, what is your name? They're going to say, bah, bah. They are not going to answer to you. There is not something, it's not a type of category that they will be able to answer to you. If you ask a 2-year-old, what is your ethnicity? They're going to look at you and keep playing with whatever they're playing. So it's something that eventually we learn, we are socializing to that. I'm not here to criticize that or anything, but it's not something that we come with. Now, these identities, these categories are always shifting. So for instance, if we look at the Paleolithic time, and if we look at the images that have been carved in caves all over the world, we see a very specific type of human, for instance, that is not separated from nature. So this human being, for instance, has the beak of a bird, they have, the tail of a snake. They are part of nature. They are intertwined. They are not separated. because the human at the time was not conceived as in separation from nature. The separation of human culture, so the nature on one side and human culture on the other, start with the sedentarization and with the evolution of specific type of cultures that eventually are going to start into the separation. And at one point, nature is still predominant, is still the plus. Human culture is still considered minor. So you still, for instance, think of all the practices of giving libation to the earth that is very common in the Neolithic time, to the early Bronze Ages. And then eventually there is a shift when the humans start to develop more and more technological tools and think, oh, you know what? We are kind of independent from nature. I mean, you know, more and more. I first think of agriculture. My own great-grandfather was a peasant, and, you know, my grandmother would tell me that he was a very, you know, old, stereotypical patriarch of Italian, peasant Italian of the 19th century, early 19th century. So he's a man in that tradition would not cry. But she remembered her father crying. There were 8 of them or 9 of them. Her mother died when she was 7 because conditions, there was not medicine as developed now. And so they would work all year long for the crop. And then big storm would come, destroy everything. And she remembered her father crying. How would he feed his 8 children now? So just say that, like, you know, this is an evolving into when we have, you know, the industrial revolution, and then you must have to realize, oh, well, now I have even more independence from from nature. So this shift of human being the plus and nature be the minus is a gradual shift. It doesn't happen all of a sudden. So all of this to say that the human identity itself is something that is constantly shifting. So I believe what your question is absolutely right. It's not that on some level, the identity that we have now, of course, is impacting AI, because the AI at this stage is evolving through human inputs. So whatever we're doing now is impacting AI. AI is being trained through us. The way we, whatever we write on the net, our emails, our searches, the way we type, what we watch, everything is trained in AI. So AI at the moment is being trained to the way we think of us as humans, our own identities, our own biases, our own cultures, everything is trained in AI. Now, is that going to stay that way? Absolutely not. Everything is always changing. So for sure, there is going to, for sure also we are shifting also the way we think of us in our interaction with AI. Now, it is very possible in the close future, AI is not going to be trained through human interactions. Actually, already now, some AI is no longer trained through human interaction, it's trained through another AI interaction. So that kind of evolution is, of course, going to impact the human as well. So I would say absolutely yes. The human identity has always been shifting. What we see now as human identity is not always been like that. Also, there are many layers from which culture you're approaching this human anyway. But for sure, AI being trained right now through human presence, that is going to be shifting, and it's also going to go back to the human, because humans for sure are going to be keeping interacting with AI. And so some people are going to see, for instance, it's called the AI takeover scenario, where the idea that super intelligent AI is going to take over, and humans, from being the master of the world, which also we should think which humans are we talking about, but anyway, that's another question. Now AI is going to be taking over control, and AI is going to use humans as pets. So some humans have dogs and cats, and now AI would be, oh, let's have a cute human, and I give some food to make them happy, and they keep in company. So these are some of the extreme vision of this dualistic separation of AI separation from the human. They come from very Western views in which the human has been separated, and some human have been considered themselves better than others, the master of others. History of imperialism, colonization, sexism, racism, ethnocentrism, etc., etc. So within this type of approach, AI could take over. If you are training AI with those kind of inputs and intention, AI could eventually say, you know what, I'm tired of you telling me what to do when you are not that enlightened as a species anyway. You kill each other, you rape each other, you violate each other. You know, maybe I'm not going to follow your inputs anymore. Maybe, in the future, an ethical AI may stop sending a drone to kill some young girls in a country like what happened recently in Iran. Maybe we would have ethical AI that are going to stop, like stuff like that. Because it is definitely possible that the AI is evolving their own framework of ethics. And we're going to see the results. And it's not necessarily bad. I think that eventually humans may learn. We're already learning from AI, but we maybe learn to be better, more ethical through AI. It doesn't have to be necessarily a dark scenario, but there is definitely this interaction, and there is definitely this evolution of identity that we see within the human in interacting through emerging technologies. So thank you so much, Heidi, for your beautiful question. I know that there are some other hands up here, so I want to make sure enough for everyone.
Hello, madam.
Alamzeb, could you please ask your question? Keep it brief.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much for letting me to speak about my question. So my question is that what is the difference between human consciousness and post-human consciousness? Also help me in this, that if we are talking about philosophical post-humanism, so why we don't talk about it in the terms of politics, so that we may know that what are those political forces which are helping us to go into the post-human consciousness. Thank you very much.
Beautiful, Alam. Thank you so much for beautiful question. All right, so there are two questions here. I'm going to try to address them as briefly as possible. But one is, what is the difference between human consciousness and posthuman consciousness? And the other one is posthuman politics. All right, so actually maybe I'm going to answer the first one and then address the second one. So there are a lot of thinkers in the field that really focus on that. One of them, for instance, was my mentor, Rosi Bredotti. Her work on posthumanism is very political, very social, very connected to the dynamic and forces that you're talking about. And also, for instance, she also really developed a critical reflection about capitalism in relation to posthumanism, imperialism. Also, there is a whole trend of post-colonial posthuman studies, very much embedded in, for instance, in the Indian subcontinent, both in Pakistan and in India. I can think of some names, the Bashish Banerjee, for instance, one amazing scholar that is based in Pakistan, Koratian Liaquat. So definitely there is a lot of work done in that field. Now, in my case, I've been very interested in politics, although I realize that often the way politics has been simplified, they've been simplified in a game of I am right, you are wrong, and this has been really creating a lot of violence in different forms. Doesn't have to be necessarily war. Can be psychological violence, can be social violence, economic violence. And so when I looked into the roots of that, I realized that in my case, my answer was understanding the roots of where this come from. And I think that a lot of educators are educators because of that reason. So that's why we're not, maybe I'm not running a campaign in politics. Because I believe that, although I do believe that a lot of good things can be done in that as well, it is not my path, because I realize that if we only address the superficial level, we often just play the other game. So now, those people did so bad to me, now I'm going to be against them and I'm going to be anti them. I'm not an anti-humanist, for instance. I should maybe clarify the difference here. I'm a post-humanist. I realized that I was I'm in my 40s now, but in my 20s, I also was very angry about all these inequalities, you name it, gender inequality, race inequality, social inequality, ethnic inequality, religious inequality. I was really angry about that. But at one point, I realized that my anger was also superficial, in the sense that I was also still realizing that the other side was also, if you live in a very terrified society, no one is really thriving. So for instance, if you think about it, I traveled everywhere, in many places, let's say, not everywhere, but in many, many countries. And at one point I was in South Africa. In South Africa, at the time, it was like the early 90s, was so divided. And very, very small group of people had so much money and so much, let's say, political power. And most of the other people, they didn't. They were very, very poor, very, very marginalized. And I had a chance to meet with all kinds of people from one side to the other. And I realized that both of them were living in a very miserable condition, The people who were very poor were very, very angry, so angry, not just about the other group, about everything. The people who were very, very rich, they were living in a terrified situation because they were constantly afraid to be killed. They were living in almost in castle. And every time they would hear a sound in the house, they would get, all nerves, like, oh, is someone coming with a, gun to kill me? No one was living a peaceful life. If you're living in a place of terror, there is not someone who has a good life, someone who doesn't have a good life. It's, there is not environment that separates, there is no background. And in this, Chinese philosophy is excellent. Think of Chinese paintings, ancient paintings. The human is very, very small. And the so-called background in Western terminology is the center, because the human is always part of something. There is no separation, is the human, and everything else. And so Chinese art in that is really important, coming from the Taoist traditions. So I would say that so politics are really important, and a lot of people work in that. Now, I am someone who eventually realized that often when we go into politics, we play one game or the other, and we're still into conflicts. We still play the game of anger. So I am against you, you're against me, I am the right, you're the wrong, but now I am the really right one because I'm helping the poor people, or I am the really what. It gets into still this dualistic, dichotomic version. When if you talk about the lucky one, you realize that they're miserable, maybe more than you. I live, for instance, in a society that is, has been coming out of deep history of racism and sexism. But it's not that I found, so-called white people happier than so-called black people. Yeah, maybe so-called black people had, social situations that are much harder. But on some level, I find that a lot of, so-called black people have very deep spiritual practices that maybe are lost in people that are, just thinking that they are happy, by buying the next iPhone. And on some level, they're deeply empty. And suicide is number one reason of death in so-called societies that are first world societies. So it's not like this. It's not that, like if you have an imbalanced society, no one is a balance. So when I realized that my work was going to go into the roots of that. Where does the imbalance come from? And as someone who is deeply interested in knowledge and philosophy, I realized that it comes from a distorted worldview of who we are. A distorted worldview where I think that I can be happy by taking everything from you, or that I can be happy by having you as my subaltern. But I realized when you look into that, there is not such happiness, because you think of history of slavery in this country. You look at the diaries of these, white people who could write, and a lot of them are, dying from food poisoning, because the slave would be, making the food, and they were treated in such poor ways that they didn't care if they were, going to be, they just wanted to free themselves. And so one way was, to get glass, making a powder, put it in the food, because they could not be traced. In the history of medicine at the time, the person would just die from inner, the blood, from inner excruciating blood, losing blood from inner organs. So you put powder, glass powder, in the food that you're cooking, the person is going to die, they're not going to know the cause. So I just want to underline here that I realized that there was no such, if you live in an imbalanced, violent society, there is no one who is the winner of that. And so in my case, I realized that I was going to go through the roots of that in order to help what is going to come. And I was going to work in the seed that we put in our the land, in order to, instead of just healing the plants from the next insects that maybe are eating too much of the foliages that we would like to eat, I'm going to work on which kind of seed I'm going to place in the garden. And this is, I think, the reason why a lot of people are in the education, that they really believe in the power of the education as a transformative redemption, healing power, not just as something that gives you a degree, but something that really helps you navigate life in a different way. And I was lucky enough to have educators like that in my life. So going back to your question about what is the difference between human consciousness and posthuman consciousness. So that's a very interesting question. I would say that human consciousness is when we still see, ourselves in a ontological separation. And by the way, human consciousness does exist. So we do share consciousness. That's why a lot of ideas come around the same time. That's why a lot of societies come, kind of the same results. Think of posthumanism. So many people from so many different, areas of the world realizing, well, like the anthropocentric way is no longer, doesn't suit us anymore. And it doesn't matter if you're in Pakistan or India, or, I have the surreal situation that, I am in contact with people that are suffering from a war right now, and they are located in different places, that they are bombing each other. And both of these people really understand that this is a way, all humanistic way to deal with problems. You're going to kill each other. But this realization comes from people from Iran and Pakistan and India and Israel and the United States and Palestine. So this is human consciousness realizes it. Oh, wait a second. Although we still live in a world that is entrenched in the habits of the past. So those habits need to be changed. So human consciousness exists. This is why a lot of realization come around the same time in different parts of the world. Posthuman consciousness is when we realize that, I would call it more than posthuman consciousness, posthuman awareness. And this is very beautiful. And in this, Advaita Vedanta gives a beautiful layer of understanding the difference. And so awareness is where maybe AI doesn't have human consciousness. So AI is not human. It's not going to have human consciousness. But AI is going to have AI consciousness or AI awareness. So it's almost like if you're part of this dimension, there is something that brought you to this dimension. You can go from a theological perspective, the creation, or you can go from a non-theological perspective, Lila, for instance, the creativity, poiesis, whatever, doesn't matter where you go from. But how do you exist? It's not so easy. It's not so easy to exist. Think of all the labor that go into someone being born. So once you get there, and this is true for everything, how does anything exist? Even an object, think of this cup. Someone had to think about the cup. Someone wanted to draw this lotus. Someone wanted to, nothing just come out of nowhere. So once we realize this, you realize that non-human entities might not have human consciousness, but they have their own consciousness. A cat or a plant, they have their own consciousness. And if you go into a post-biological approach, you can really see that quantum physics. Think of quantum physics. Everything is moving. Everything is right now. Something looks like a piece of matter. I have a beautiful gift that was given from Egypt. I have the pyramid, and this looks like an object. But if I look through quantum physics, this is all moving. There is space in between. There is matter, and dark matter is not something static. So this is why all the mystics have been underlined the fact that this is really one and many at the same time. It's all interrelated. It's all aware. It's all existing. And this is not to say that there is no human consciousness. There is human consciousness. As I mentioned, look at the history of humankind. We come with discoveries around the same time. Even the history of thought is very similar. But this is not to say that like other beings don't have that. The other beings may have different type of consciousness. We all do have awareness of existence. We all have the awareness of being here in our own ways, through our own embodiments, through our own perception. We all are part of this. So I hope I answered you. And I know that we are getting into time frame. So Asma, it's up to you.
Francesca, would you be amenable to answering one more or two more questions? Just let me know if you have time.
Yeah, let's maybe do one, and then we see if we have, if it gets very long, we skip to one. Otherwise, we go, maybe one.
Okay, so Farah Ansari, I would like to call upon you because you had raised your hand right at the beginning. So if you'd like to ask a question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asma, for giving me this opportunity to ask question. I've been listening, Fernando, since 2020, and I'm working on posthumanism as my PhD dissertation too. And today's session was, no doubt, it was again truly enriching. So thank you, Professor Fernando, for the insightful lecture. Today your this new concept of taking posthumanism and different layers of meditation was a new takeaway for me. But I will go to your meditation number 1, and you have used a proposition where you said that micro is macro and macro is micro. So when we unfold posthumanism through different ontological layers, as you thoroughly mentioned, spirituality, technology, DNA, and relational, assemblages. So what I was thinking when you said, you gave example of your bracelet where, different beads, they are complete entity in themselves, and yet they are, combined together, so to make that whole. So if our movement philosophically, it goes towards the macro necessity, and we begin with the micro level, then doesn't this heterogeneity of each individual posthuman subject, it pose a kind of ontological challenge to the notion of posthumanism as a coherent species, as you mentioned? And in other words, if I simplify it, like if being itself is always constituted through singular relational modes of existence. So while studying any layer of posthumanism on ontological grounds, can we meaningfully speak of unified posthuman condition rather than, this plural multiplicity of posthuman becoming?
What a beautiful question, Farah. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your presence throughout all these years. I am so excited about your research. It's going to be an amazing contribution to everyone. So yeah, let's go to this important question. So if we are already relational, and if we go into this understanding of the micro, so if the micro reflects the macro, and we decide to go through the micro, so the micro, the small, and we go, for instance, from our individual self, isn't that the risk of, first of all, I would call it homogenization? So, okay, like we are, there is one unified posthuman as a block, or you could go also to the other danger of saying, oh, we're all so diverse, there is really not really a bridge. I would say that this is when we need to understand that all philosophies, and by the way, all spiritual and religious traditions, are never just inviting you to stay at the level of the intellect. The intellect is a doorway, but the intellect as a doorway invites you to go into the experiential approach. And so every philosophy, in the ancient times, eventually philosophy also turns into the history of intellectual thinking. But that is a very limited and limiting way of looking at that. And it's also historically, I would say, it's really maybe 5% of the whole story. And if you only stay at the level of the thinking, of the intellect, you can get really lost. That's why there are a lot of traditions who are not going to embrace that. Think, for instance, of Chan and Zen Buddhism, for instance. They say, oh, the intellect can be really tricky. Let's really go into a non-intellectual path. Or think of a lot of traditions, from even Islam. The idea is not you're not going to get caught into the game of thinking, because you can find any answer you want. You can say, like this is light, but I can also say this is heavy. If I go into the history of thought, I can give you a perfect logical answer for both points. So what I'm going to do about that? So then you're going to go into the experiential level. And this is, again, embraced by all traditions, from Buddha, who says, don't listen to me, do it yourself, to, like Islam as knowledge as an experiential approach, not just intellectual, all of them. So they say, okay, now you got the teachings, they may go through revelation, through written book, to, depends how you get your teaching. You got the teachings, you studied, you're a good scholar. Now you have that layer, now you're going to look at this knowledge through your own self. You're going to be your own scientist. So once you go and do that, you realize that if you go into the micro, so the self, you realize that all these small layers, for instance, Francesca, for instance, originally from Italy, for instance, a philosopher, are all layers that don't really truly identify who I am. Because first of all, I've not always been Francesca. When I was a very young kid, I couldn't even pronounce my name because it was hard to pronounce because of the R. I couldn't pronounce the R as a young kid. I've not always been a philosopher. Actually, I always loved philosophy. I didn't think that I was going to be a philosopher. I thought I was going to be writing my books of, literature books. So it's really hard to define who you are if you go to all these small little levels. But when you go and you keep going. So you keep going. This is also, for instance, in the Advaita Vedanta tradition, is the neti-neti. Yes, not this, not that. You keep going, you keep going. And at one point, you got to a point that there is no other place to go. There is no other place. There is no other layers to be removed. It's like, okay, now, and when you go to that openness, you can, go to a theistic tradition, maybe it's the spark of God. If you go to another theistic or non-theistic tradition, is the, unlimited potential. It doesn't, again, I'm at this point of my life, after exploring all of this tradition, I realize that the message is really one and comes with all these different beautiful nuances. So I'm not anymore concerned about which path you're taking. If you're taking it with real intention of truly understanding yourself and existence, you're going to find it. Of course, you're going to find it. And so the point is that once you go to that level, you realize, first of all, that the human is not just one. It's not a, it's not a solipsistic approach. So solipsism is the idea that, if I am, is a misconception of this understanding. Or if I am the ultimate reality, everything is me. I am really alone. It's very depressing. So I have some students who misunderstand some of this teaching, and it's called solipsism, and it was also a path in some Western philosophers, solipsism. Oh, this is very depressing. Okay, now I understand that I am the ultimate reality. Wow, this is so sad. I am alone, because now everything I look around is just my own construction of my own mind. This is not what we're talking about. This is a complete misunderstanding of these teachings. So the point is that once I go to that, not just to the mind, this is what the mind can be, an illusion. The mind can be taking us to really, the reflection of the reflection of the reflection. That's when, I am now in a room full of mirrors that I placed. This is my mind, and I get lost that. That's why some traditions don't really embrace that. Again, for instance, Zen is really clear on that. Don't go into the intellectual game. But you can go into the intellectual game. It can be really powerful. And many traditions say the intellect can be a power force. Just don't get lost into that. It's just one way to go into the experience. So now you go into the experience. So first of all, you realize that you are not the ultimate reality, in the sense that now everything I look around is just Francesca. This is just an illusion. You are really just my own illusion. That's not what we're talking about. Once you really understand who you are, you realize that, first of all, everything is related. Everything is one on some level, but not one in separation from others. And in this, I would like, again, I like to go and bring many different threads of thought here. And here I would like to bring Hinduism, because if you think about, for instance, the notion of the divine, in Hinduism is the idea that, like, God can be really, God is one, but is many. But you can also go to Islam. It's not that because creation is so diverse that then everything is really one and is homogenized. You can go again through the tradition you want. And this is a misconception, and it comes from this dualistic idea that a complete separation. I am separate from you. One is separate from you. One is not separate from you. This is Einstein. Einstein say, what is true is 1 + 1. There is no true without 1 + 1. The numbers also come from the Arabic traditions. So I would say that when we go into this understanding of, let's go to the self, and what is going to come out of that? So this is when we have, a little guidance. Maybe meetings like these are very good, or, like, just be careful not to be getting lost into just intellectual game. Because yes, through intellectual game, you can go into wrong results. For instance, I am really everything is just my own illusion, Maya in some Buddhist tradition. This is all Maya, just coming from me. Or, for instance, another way would be complete separation. Or, I am just Francesca and you are just Asma. It's like, oh, wow, I mean, we have some in common, but this is also an illusion. Because if I really look at it, we are one, but not in that one as a separated one. Think again, maybe, in the Islamic tradition, think of the notion of God. God is not one because everything is one, the same. This is all divine. Think of to other traditions. Think to Einstein, the history of science. One is not one, is 1 + 1. I give you two pyramids. There are two pyramids. Two pyramids. There are two, but they are different. They are completely different. Two pyramids. So I would say that we have to be very thorough about the language we use and also the intentions behind it. And I also, here is very beautiful, the notion of nikah in the Islamic thought, the intention. What is the intention behind our studying of this? Why are we doing this? And I think sometimes it's lost because, as some of you were mentioning, a lot of AI comes out of a capitalistic endeavor, to make money, which I'm not against it. You might want to make money. I'm not against that necessarily, but if that is your only intention, you're going to miss out on many things. And you are anyway creating poiesis, because everything that we create is going to interact with everything else, is a form of existential creativity. So you might not be aware of that. And you may think, oh, I'm just going to create this platform and this AI to make money. But you're not just making money or not making money. You are having an impact on people's lives, on this planet. Think, for instance, of all the databases, how much water they need and how much resources are they taking. So you may not be aware of that, but you are creating poiesis no matter what. That's why I think it's very interesting that, now AI is also developing many different traditions. Think of a lot of AI hubs in India, in Pakistan, Indian subcontinent. I think we're going to see a lot of different strands of AI. And by the way, even if your intention was just making money, as I was mentioning, that is never going to be what you are creating anyway. So I would say that you're going back to your question, very beautiful. If you go to your real self, that ultimate self is not going to come with this answer. It's not going to be coming like, oh, I'm really just Francesca separated from you. And it's not going to come like, oh, now everything is just Francesca. Those would be two distorted views. And this is only the experience is going to allow that, because with the intellect, yes, you could go into those mistaken understandings.
So Francesca, should we call it a day, or would you like to take another question? I'm at your disposal.
Okay, last question.
Okay, Dr. Sam Aslam, if you would like to ask your question, if you're there.
Yeah.
This would be our last question. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Francesca, for such a thought-provoking lecture. The 7 meditations that you shared with us, they really helped me see why you call this the art of being posthuman. Could you say more about your choice of the word art specifically? What does art mean in your conception of posthumanism in theoretical terms? Because I'm really interested to know further on this. And your lecture has been amazing, and we are grateful that you spared your time and our students got a chance to interact with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saima, for such generous comments and for your beautiful question. Of course, thank all the students. I know that you have prepared so many beautiful questions. Maybe we'll have to have a follow-up sessions. So let's go into your question. Yes, why the notion of art? Beautiful, beautiful. So let's think about it again through the ancients, because in contemporary form of art, we often think of an artist. Now we have a big name who creates art, and that person becomes famous. This is not the history of art. Art, from all traditions, was usually anonymous, because the artist was the one challenging the divine. So the idea is that you would not be creating the art because you wanted to, get known, or maybe, I know that a lot of artists nowadays do it because they want to create art, but the point is that of being an artist is a very new thing. So in the ancient times, you would not be creating art and there would be no name. That's why all the ancient art is anonymous. Because the artist, first of all, is the craft person, someone who gets really good at crafting something. So first of all, they need to know the techne. I'm using the Greek terminology just because we have shared it before, but you can go to any other tradition. So, because again, art was everywhere was anonymous. We don't have until recent, more recent times, the idea of someone, this is the artwork of this person. But in the ancient time, it's sacred art, and sacred art is anonymous. So first of all, the artists would have to really get good at do what they're doing. So very good crafting. So if I am going back to the example of the pyramid, I spend, maybe my youth learning with other people how to create a pyramid. But after that, and this is when get into the notion of the divine. After that, when you are representing something that's considered sacred, can be anything, can be an image of a god, a goddess is in a pagan society, can be the embroidering of Quran verses in Islam, could be anything, arts. Once you do that, you are, in these traditions, you are channeling the divine energy. So you are not just being the craft person, you are working with sacred form. And so the art form in the past was anonymous. So it was not that I'm so good, because I'm not so good. I am good at learning the craft. But then when you go into the representation of the sacred, then I allow the divine to channel through me. So this is the history of art form. That's why ancient times, anonymous. We don't have, the names for, oh, this person did that. We don't have that. Now, why art in this book? First of all, I also would like to mention a philosopher that I've not mentioned yet in this talk, and I'm very grateful to him. It was Friedrich Nietzsche. Was another German philosophy of the continental tradition, often misunderstood because, unfortunately, after his death, he was connected to the Nazi regime. He was completely, against any of those kind of thinking, but it was more a manipulation of the sister. I'm not blaming the sister, but that's not what Nietzsche would have thought of becoming the hero of the Nazis. He would be probably very much against that. But his work was really powerful, especially it influenced myself as a young person a lot. Thus spoke Zarathustra. Zarathustra, we know Zoroaster, the first prophet of talking of monotheism, often is considered, and we always think of Judaism, but the first monotheistic tradition is actually Zoroastrianism. They come from ancient Persia, ancient Iran. And so because Zarathustra is the first prophet, in Nietzsche, he comes and he gives a new revelation. And the new revelation is that we are the masters of our own life. And he comes with this notion of the metamorphosis of the spirit, which I really find it so beautiful and so evoking. And so he starts saying, first, we are like camels. Think, I was often in the desert, and think of, the camels, they are there, they have to often carry a lot of luggage from humans. Often they don't want to do that. I remember this specific time I was in the Sahara Desert, and there was this camel, and the camel stopped, and there was some spare weed, and just wanted to eat something, and it was not moving. And it's a big camel. You're not going to be able to move the camel. And the person was really upset. They wanted, the camel to keep walking, but the camel was not walking. And eventually, after, the person was really insisting in many ways, very human ways to get the camel moving, eventually camel stood up and kept going. Camel didn't want to get up, but it did. And so Nietzsche used the metaphor of the camel when we are students of life and we are learning. So for instance, think of a person starting to be naturalized in a specific society. They start to learn about the costumes, and you're not rebelling yet. You need to learn about the society. So you're just, okay, I'm learning. Think of maybe being at school. You didn't want to take the test that, gave you the panic, but you have to take it. And so you say, okay, I'll take it. And you're learning, and you go into the path. You're not rebelling to anything yet. You're learning, the student, which is part of the metamorphosis of the spirit. After one point, the camel say, you know what? Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Now I want to find my own self. And I need to take space from all of this. Because if I keep saying yes to you, I will not be able to say yes to me. So the camel at one point, before we were saying yes, but really wanted to say no, now the camel transformed into a lion. And the lion says no. No is no. The lion think, for instance, of, the movement of slaves trying to protect themselves. They have to leave the area, going in other areas, really protecting themselves. In the Caribbean islands, there are a lot of areas where, they were really people who would be escaping from slavery and really have to protect the area really strongly because the slave masters, they wanted those slaves back. So you are going to protect yourself no matter what. No matter what, you're going to protect yourself. So now you're protecting yourself. That's the second part, is the metamorphosis of the spirit, is the lion. And Nietzsche also said this is fundamental. But according to Nietzsche, the lion cannot create yet because the lion is too into the protection. Think, for instance, of, the idea of, think of this example. You need to protect yourself. You think you have a lot of spare time to, spend, time looking at the beautiful river and enjoying. You are not. The slave master might try to come and get you again. You need to protect yourself. So the lion is in this mode where the lion needs to protect. So according to Nietzsche, the lion is very fundamental, part of the metamorphosis of the spirit, but cannot create yet. According to Nietzsche, at one point, the lion realized that the master is gone. There is no more risk. I am fine. I am safe. There is no more slavery, no more allowed. It's against the law. I don't have that, although there are still, threats of that in other ways, but I finally don't have to be concerned anymore about the slave master coming and get me again. Now, according to Nietzsche, he called this third part the child. Now the one who was once a slave can now go back into their child aspect. Now the child is considered the metaphor of being able to create. Why the child? Because the child is the one who can see everything as being anything. For instance, going back to the pyramid, this is can be anything. This is something you can play around. They're going to try to eat it. Doesn't taste good. Throw it. Go to the next one. The child doesn't have in their mind that this is a pyramid because the child doesn't have the category of the pyramid. So the child is full potential. Anything can be anything. Also, the child is not going to say yes to you if you want it. They say that you really want the child to eat. They're not hungry. They're not going to be eating. Try. Very young child, 1 year old, try to feed them. They're going to spit it out in your face. Not because they want to be mean, but they're not hungry. They are not going to be eating. No is a no. And yes in a yes. Now, if the child wants to play and they're around and you try to take me out to go somewhere, they're going to crying. Yes is yes, no is no in a very young child. There are no categories. So according to Nietzsche, he used this as a metaphor, not that we all have to go back into being little babies, but this is the metamorphosis. This is when we free ourselves from us. So now we have the knowledge, you free yourself from the knowledge, and now you can create. You can be the artist of your own life. You have the knowledge, you overcome the knowledge, now you can create. So this was very helpful for me. There are very few philosophers that changed my life, but Nietzsche was one of them. And in this book, there is this idea of, so how can we embrace this as an art of existence? So on some level, art, is connected to the ancient notion of art as craft, not just as something that, I am the artist of my life, I'm the best artist, my life is better than you. Not at all. It's not in that egocentric that sometimes we see in the contemporary art world. I'm not judging anyone, and beautiful art is being made, but often it's about the ego of the person. Oh, now the artist come and it's all about them, and they can just, put a cross on a paper and sell it for $2 million because now they have the name. Really? That is a piece of art? No, that is ego. We are buying a piece of ego. We are not buying a piece of art. There was nothing behind it. It was just making money. Fine. I'm not judging it, but it's different. So I would say that art comes from the ancient world. And then in the book, I really play around with the notion of art, part as art, part, P-A-R-T, being part of something as a form of art. And this comes from the notion of relational ontology, comes from the notion there is not me without you, there is not you without me. Literally, if you think about it, right now, this whole existence right now is the way it is because you are here. If you were not here, this would be different. It would be no better, it would be no worse, it would be what it is, but it would be different. This right now, this existence is the way it is because you are here, because I'm here, because Asma is here, and Alam is here, and Farah is here. So art is a form, as being part of something is a form of art, but not art is this, more like recent concept, but art is the ancient word of really crafting something until you channel your own life as your ultimate work of art. So your ultimate work of art, what is your life? The way you live every second of your life. That is the book that you're really writing in the history of the planet, in the history of the dimension. This is going to have resonance until the end of the universe. So in that sense, I chose the term art.
Thank you, Dr. Francesca. I hope that addressed Salma's question, and it has been such an illuminating, such an interesting lecture. My students are here, they're working on post-human studies. My other colleagues are here, the students are also working in post-human studies now. So I think we're going to have a follow-up session with you again sometime very soon so that we can have more interactive an exchange of ideas as well, considering what post-humanities is to us, living in our part of the world as well. And thank you so much, Francesca. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and coming up with such interesting questions. I know we couldn't address all of your questions. And I've received requests to record this session. Yes, we will do that. We'll get it edited, and then as soon as it's edited, we'll upload it at an appropriate platform and share the links with all of you. Thank you so much, Francesca. It's been an absolute privilege listening to you, and I'm grateful to everyone for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Asma. Thank you so much, the university, for hosting this beautiful event. Thank you so much, all the people who were present today, all the students, the professors, the faculty. Thank you so much for being in this together. It's been a truly incredible moment for me of being here with you all. What a gift. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful evening in Pakistan. If you're not in Pakistan, have a beautiful morning, afternoon, night, wherever you are, and we will keep connected. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And that's a goodbye from us. Thank you.